In this video, I'll show you how to create an animated arrow on one layer that you can easily reuse across many After Effects projects. We won't be using any plugins or third-party software. There are many ways to animate arrows in After Effects, but by creating both the arrowhead and line on the same shape layer, there are no nulls and it's less layers to clutter your timeline. You can change the position, scale, and rotation, adjust the colors or stroke, and add effects to stylize it. The animation can be adjusted by adjusting the keyframes. All this and the arrowhead will stay attached to the line. It's easy to copy and paste the layer to use it in other comps. Plus, you can save it as a preset so you can easily reuse the arrow with its animation across any After Effects project. No need to import anything. This method uses expressions, but I'll walk you through every step so you don't need to know anything about expressions to follow along. First, I'll show you how to create an arrow with perfectly rounded corners right in After Effects. Then we'll animate the arrow's line and attach the arrowhead to the line, making sure it's aligned and rotates along the path correctly. If you have artwork created in Illustrator that you want to use for your arrow, I'll show you how you can use that. Next, I'll cover a few solutions if your arrowhead isn't cooperating and show you how to switch the direction of your arrow. Finally, I'll show you how to save your arrow as a preset so you can easily reuse it in any After Effects project. You'll find a link in the description where you can download the preset that I've created, the expressions that you can copy and paste, and a project file with these examples. First, let's start from scratch and create an arrow right inside of After Effects. So I'm going to make an arrow that's going to be going kind of across and then down, so it'll have a nice curve in it. So in order to get really perfect curve, I'm going to start with a rectangle with rounded corners. So right here I have a composition that's 1000 by 1000 pixels and 30 frames per second, 5 seconds. So from here I'm just going to double click on the rectangle tool, and this will make a rectangle that's the size of my composition. You might need to adjust your stroke or fill. Mine has no fill and a stroke that's 20 pixels. The reason that I created a rectangle like this instead of just drawing it out is because now the position and anchor points are all going to be zeroed. So if I go down into my timeline and toggle down next to transform rectangle 1, you can see the anchor point and position are 0 here, and also in the main transform properties, the anchor point is zeroed here. And then the position is just for the middle of the composition, which makes sense. So I'll just close those up for now. We can delete the fill because I'm never going to need that, and you can always add it back if you do. And so now let's go into the rectangle path, and let's just bring this down. So let's maybe make it like 500 instead of 1000, just so it's a little bit easier to see. Now to get those perfectly rounded corners, I'm just going to bring up the roundness on this. So let's go with like 200. Alright, so I just want to use from like here to about here. So what I'm going to do is take the rectangle path right here, select that, and then right click on it and do convert to Bezier path. And now I can take this path and I can edit it. So what we need to do is delete like 3/4 of it basically. So with this path selected, what I need to do is select 2 points that are next to each other. And I need to open up this path. So you can right click on the path itself or down here in the timeline, go to mask and shape path and uncheck where it says closed. So now it's going to open up the shape right there, and then I can just go and delete all of these points that I don't need. So I just want my arrow to be like that. So let's go in and rename rectangle 1 to line. I'll also rename the entire layer arrow. I'm going to go underneath stroke and then change the end caps. Right now they're flat. I'm going to change them to rounded caps. And just in case I change my mind about the shape of this line, I'm going to change the join to round join, just so that those look more consistent. This doesn't change the look of it right now because I don't have any hard corners. Alright, so we can close this up and let's make the arrowhead. To make sure that the arrowhead is perfectly geometric, I'm going to go right here and turn on the grid. Let's just zoom in to where we want the arrow to be at the end. And then I'm just holding down spacebar to move my whole composition over so I can see it better. I'm going to go up to View and then make sure that Snap to Grid is checked. And then from here, I'm going to grab the pen tool and then draw out my arrowhead. Because the line is in between grid lines, I'm going to draw the arrowhead slightly off from the line, and then I can just reposition it later. Before I start drawing, I need to make sure that the arrow is selected so that it adds this arrowhead to this shape layer. So now I'm going to click on one of these intersections of the grid to create a first point, and then go down 2 and over 2 to create my second piece of the arrow, and then back up 2 and over 2 to do the second half of the arrowhead. Then to switch back to the selection tool, I'm just going to hit V on the keyboard, which is just the shortcut to get to this. And let's zoom in a little bit more and just make sure that these actually snapped exactly to the grid. All right, so that looks pretty good. This shape 1 is the arrowhead, so let's rename that. And then I'm going to toggle down the arrowhead, and let's just delete the fill. And then underneath stroke, I'm going to change it to round caps with round joins. And we can close up stroke. And then underneath path, I need to make sure that the path is selected so that it's selected next to the one that has the stopwatch. And then I'm going to move this entire path so that it is exactly positioned on the end of my line. So that looks pretty good. I can also turn off the grid because I won't need that anymore, and zoom out. The reason that I just moved the arrowhead into place by adjusting the entire path is so that the transform arrowhead position and anchor point are still 0. So right now I have the position and anchor point 0 for the transform arrowhead, and also underneath transform line, the anchor point and position are also 0. This just helps to have everything be aligned when we start to try to animate the arrowhead along the arrow. I'll talk more about any issues that you might have if these aren't zeroed out and how to fix them at the end of the video. Underneath the line, I'm going to make sure that I have that selected and then go up to add and then choose trim paths. So this is how we're going to animate the line drawing in. So I'm going to toggle down next to trim paths and set a keyframe for the end at about 20 frames to be 100%. And then I'm going to go back to the start of the timeline and just set the end value to be 0. So now the line is going to animate in like this. So now we need to attach the arrowhead to the end of the line. So to do this, I'm just going to toggle down the arrowhead and then toggle down next to transform arrowhead. Now I'm going to write an expression on the arrow's position property that attaches it to the animated end of the line. You can still follow along if you've never written an expression before. I'll try to explain what the expression is doing, but you don't have to completely understand everything or anything about expressions in order to continue following this tutorial. So to start writing an expression, I'm just going to Option, or on a PC it would be Alt, click on the stopwatch next to position. And this opens up this little text area where I can start writing my expression. First, I'm going to start by defining a few variables. You can kind of think of this as giving things names so that it's easy to call them up by name and reuse them later on in the expression. So to create a variable, you just do var and then give the variable a name. So I'm going to call this path layer, and I'm writing it in camel case. So the first word's first letter is lowercase, and then the second word's first letter is going to be uppercase. And then I'll just do space equals. Next, we need to tell After Effects what we want this path layer to be. So basically, we're going to write the address for this line. So first it's going to be content. It'll probably guess what you want, so you can always just hit enter when it does. And that's because it's underneath contents here. And then we need to tell it which thing under content. So we'll tell it the name of line. To do that, you need parentheses. And then inside the parentheses, you need quotes. And then type in line exactly as it's written here. And then I'm just going to click to the end of this line and do a semicolon. So in JavaScript, which is the language that we're writing to write expressions, you just put semicolons at the end of every line, kind of like you would put a period at the end of a sentence. And now let's hit return or enter to go to the next line. Well, let's create another variable. I'm going to name this path, and then this is going to drill down into the line's actual path. So to create the address for that, we can actually use this variable that we just created. And then it's going to be content, parentheses, quotes, path with a capital, and then 1, and then I'm just going to arrow over dot path, and then semicolon. I'm going to go to the next line and create another variable. This one's going to be called progress, and this is going to pinpoint where the end of that line is. So getting the trim path and then finding the end value of that. So we need to write that address, and again, we can reuse that path layer variable that we've already created. And then to get the address for the trim path, we just need to do content, parentheses, quotes, and then trim path with an S, and then 1, making sure that the capitalization is exactly like that. And then I'm going to arrow over, and we need to get the end value of that, the one that we animated, so I'll just type in end. Then we need to add one more thing to this line, which is to divide it by 100, and then do a semicolon. I'll explain why we do that in just a second. I'm going to hit return twice, just because this is our final line where we use all of the variables to put it all together to make this actually work. So I just like to write it this way to keep things looking clean. So what we're going to do here is do path dot point on with a capital, path with a capital. So it'll just guess what you mean. You can put enter, and then you need those parentheses. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to do progress. This point on a path is a function that's built into After Effects. So what this is doing is allowing us to tell it a path that we've defined up here, and then tell it where on the path we want to attach this arrowhead to. So we've decided the point on the path that we want to attach the arrowhead to is this progress variable that we've defined as the end of the trim path. So now if I click out of this, you can see that the arrowhead is mostly moving along the line, but it's a little bit offset. So we can fix that in a second. First, I just want to explain why we divided by 100 at the end of the progress. So the point on a path function says that the beginning of the line is 0 and the end of the line is 1. But trim paths say that the beginning of the line is 0% and the end of the line is 100%. So in order to get those two numbers to align, we just need to divide the trim path number by 100. To get the arrowhead to be actually aligned with the end of the path instead of offset like this, I'm going to add an expression to the anchor point. First, I'm just going to toggle down the arrowhead's path, and then I'm going to option click the anchor point stopwatch, and I'm going to take this spiral icon next to the anchor point's expression to go up and get the address for this arrowhead's path property. So instead of typing it all out like you saw me do before, you can just take the pick whip and drag it to the property so it'll type out that address for you. But it's also added this temporary variable that we don't need, so let's just delete all that. And then I'm going to delete that semicolon too, and I'm going to add dot point on path. So the same point on path function that I used in the positions expression, but this time what I'm doing is taking the arrowhead's path and making sure that the anchor point is always halfway through that path. So the number that I'm going to put in the parentheses is 0.5, and then I can click out of that. And that should snap your arrowhead exactly to the end of the line. Now if we play this back, the arrowhead will be attached to the end of the line, but it's not rotating like you would expect along the line. So you might be familiar with going and right-clicking on a layer and going to Transform, Auto Orient, and then turning Orient Along Path on. But that's not going to work for us because the line and the arrowhead are all on the same layer. So instead what I'm going to do is write an expression on the arrowhead's rotation property. I'm going to need to define the same variables as I used in the positions expression, so I'm just going to go in and copy those first 3 lines, and then Option or Alt click on the stopwatch for rotation and paste in those 3 lines. I'm just going to click out and click back in because I can't see the full expression, and if you click out of your expression before you're done writing it, you'll probably get an error, but you can ignore that. So now we just need to come in here and create another variable, so var, and then this one is going to have 2 pieces to it, so an X and a Y piece. So I'm going to use brackets to define this kind of variable. So it's going to be tangent X, comma, tangent Y. I'm going to arrow over, do equals, and then I'm going to grab the path variable that we've defined as the path of the line, and then dot, and now we're going to use a function that's built into After Effects, which is kind of similar to the point on path, but it's going to be tangent on path. And then inside of those parentheses, we're going to use progress. So what this is doing is getting the tangent to the line, so basically how we want the rotation of the arrow to be along any point on this line. And we're defining where we want the tangent as the progress. So remember, that's the end of the line. So then I can just add a semicolon here and then hit return. And then the last part of this is just going to be some fancy math to convert this tangent into something that we can actually use as a rotation value. So that's going to be radians to degrees, and then math with a capital, dot a tan, which is a function. We want a tan 2. And then inside of that, I'm going to do tangent y, that's that variable that I defined in the line above, comma, tangent x. And then I'm going to arrow over, and I'm just going to add one more thing to this so that I can still adjust the value of the rotation in case I need to for any reason. So to do that, I'll just do plus value and semicolon. And if I click out of this, the expression has changed the rotation of the arrowhead, but it's not aligned the way that we want it to be. But because I added this plus value, I can go in and change this to -90, and now the arrowhead will be aligned how you'd expect it to be along an arrow. If you wanted to animate the arrowhead coming in, you could do that with trim paths. So making sure that the arrowhead is selected, go to the add button and choose trim paths. And then I want this to animate from the inside to the outside. So I'm going to set the start value to be 50% and the end value to be 50%. And let's just go to the start of the timeline and set keyframes for those values, and then go forward maybe just like 5 frames and set the start back to 0, so that animates that side out, and then the end to 100%, so that animates the other side out. So now the entire arrow is animating in, and if you wanted to add some animation out, you could just animate the lines trim path. So maybe we'll do the start value, so it comes from this end and animates off this way. So I'll set a keyframe for the start to be 0, and then I'll set a keyframe for the start value to be 100%. And then to animate the arrowhead off, we can just copy and paste these keyframes, right click on one, go to keyframe assistant, and then time reverse keyframes. So that'll just play the animation in the other direction. I'll align those keyframes. Maybe we'll add some easy ease, and let's play that back. Now that I've got this arrow set up, I can go in and adjust the path of the line, and the arrow should still work. You could also take this entire layer and rotate it, or move its position, or you could even scale it up or down. And the arrowhead should stay connected to the line. There's a way to use similar expressions if you want the line of your arrow and the arrowhead to be on separate layers. I've included an example like this in the free project file that you can download. If you want to use artwork from Adobe Illustrator to create your arrow, you can still do it on one layer. So let me show you how to do that. So here I have a hand and arm, and this is all on one layer. And you can see the hand is a group, and then the arm is just a path. The easiest way to get this into After Effects quickly would just be to use Overlord, and I have a whole class explaining that. But in case you don't have Overlord, I'll import it the traditional way. So in After Effects, I'm going to do Command I to import, and then navigate to where I saved the file, select the file, choose Import As, Composition, Retain Layer Sizes. That's important. Then hit Open. Now open up the comp that it's created, and first I need to convert this into a shape layer. So I'm going to right click on this Illustrator layer, go to Create Shapes from Vector Layer. We can delete the Illustrator layer because we can always get it back under this folder. If I toggle down into this shape layer that it's created for me, I might need to clean up these groups. So all of these are part of the hand. So it looks like 1 through 6 are part of the hand, and then 7 is the arm. So let's just make sure that 1 through 6 are all in their own group. So I'm going to select where it says Contents, go to Add, and create an empty group. This will be group 8, but let's rename it to Hand. Then let's drag group 1 through 6 into that hand folder. And then group 7 is the path for the arm, so let's name this Arm. Next, I need to add trim paths to the arm. So I'm going to click the Add button, go down to Trim Paths, and animate the end value. Now I need to add that expression onto the Transform Hand Position property. Instead of typing out the whole expression again, I'm going to take a shortcut, go back into the arrow composition, select it, hit EE to bring up all the expressions, and copy the expression on the position property. And then I'm going to option click on this Transform Hand Position stopwatch and paste that in. And I'm going to get an error because the path layer is not named line anymore, it's named arm. So I just need to go in and fix this. So where it says line, I'll change this to arm. So now the hand is moving with the arm, but it's a little bit offset. So to fix this with the arrow, we added an expression to the anchor point, but this was getting the path on the point for the arrowhead. So that's not going to work for the hand because this is a different kind of shape. If you click on Transform Hand, you can see that the anchor point for this group that contains all the hand artwork is over here. And so if I go back to the start of the timeline, now it's over here. We need the anchor point to actually line up with the hand so that it acts in the way that we want it to. So I'm going to select group 1 through 6 that are all within this hand folder. And I'm going to zoom in just by using my magic mouse to zoom in. And then I'm going to grab this whole hand, making sure that I'm not actually adjusting the artwork in any way, and drag it up to the anchor point. You can see the anchor point when you have Transform Hand selected, but if you have these groups selected, then you can't actually see that anchor point. So I'm going to select Transform Hand, hit Command or Control R on the keyboard to bring up the rulers, and then just bring out some guides by dragging from the rulers to make a crosshair where this anchor point is. That way, when I select these groups, I can still know where that anchor point is. So I'm just going to drag this up and place it where I think the anchor point should go on the hand. If I click off of these groups and back onto the hand, the anchor point is now looking like it's in the right place for the hand. We can clear these guides if you want to, because we won't need those anymore. And now we just need to get the arm and the hand aligned again. So if I go up into the arm layer, underneath Transform Arm, you can see that it has a position value that's not zeroed out. So if we zero this, now the line for the arm is lining up with the hand. So now the hand is going to animate along the arm. And if we want to adjust the position of the arm in the composition, we can just move the entire layer. You could also center this anchor point, if that is something that bothers you, if it's not centered. And now we're back to where we were, but this is actually working. So now I just need to go into Transform Hand and set the rotation expression. So I'm going to go back into the arrow, copy the expression on the rotation, go back into the hand, option click the stopwatch, paste that expression, and let's change the path layer to arm. And now this is working. If you're having trouble with the arrowhead not aligning to the line, here are a few solutions to help. In this example, the arrow is not aligned the entire time. So what I need to do is just go into this rotation value and set it to -90, and that fixes it. This rotation value is controlled by an expression, so normally you can't edit these values. The only reason that I'm able to edit this value is because in the expression I've added plus value to the end. In this example, it looks like the arrow is working fine, but then when it gets to its last keyframe, it flips out. So here's one way to fix something like that. If you go into the layer and then go down into the lines path, I'm going to just move my playhead so we can isolate this line. This point doesn't have any handles, so I'm going to go up to the pen tool, click and hold, and grab the Convert Vertex tool, and then just click this point to add handles to it. Now when the arrowhead reaches that point, it doesn't flip out at the end. In this example, I'm having a similar problem where the hand flips out at the last keyframe. I've already tried to add handles to this line, so that's not going to be the solution for this one. Another thing that could work is to change the last keyframe on the trim path animation to 99% or something in the 90s right before it flips out. So in this case, changing it to 99% worked. Here's how to switch the direction of an arrow moving along the path. First, you want to go into the line, and then next to path, reverse the path direction. Now it's going to animate in the other way, but the arrowhead's still going to be going the wrong direction. To fix that, we need to go under Transform Arrowhead, and then under the Positions expression, and then we need to change it so the point on path function does 1 minus progress. Also on the rotation expression, we need to do the same thing. So tangent on path needs to be 1 minus progress. Now my arrow is going in the right direction along the path, but the direction of the arrowhead needs to be rotated 180 degrees. So I'm going to go into the rotation and just change this to positive 90. And now the arrow is going in the opposite direction. Because we've created this arrow on a single layer, it's easy to save it as a preset, and then we'll be able to reuse it in any After Effects project without having to import anything. So here's how to save this as a preset. First, you want to go up into your Effects and Presets panel, and if you don't see this, go under Window and you can find it there. Then toggle open the arrow and make sure that Contents is selected just like this. If you don't have this selected, the next step might not do anything and it doesn't really give you any warning. So make sure that Contents is selected, then go over to the Effects and Presets panel to the little hamburger menu, and then do Save Animation Preset. If everything's working, you should get this pop-up window to choose where you want to save your preset. It might direct you to save it in this kind of a folder under User Presets, but I like to save it in the actual Applications folder. So if you go to the Applications on your computer, then navigate to your latest version of After Effects, or whichever one you're using, go to Presets, and then you can save it right in here, but if you want to stay organized, you can create your own folder for it. But you can't create a folder from here because it's grayed out. So if you go into Finder and you go to After Effects and then into the presets, you can right click, create a new folder. It will ask you for your password, and then you can create a new folder. And then if I go back into After Effects with this saved window still open, I can see the My Presets folder. So I'm just going to name this Arrow, make sure it's saving in My Presets, and hit Save. Now if you go to the Effects and Presets panel and toggle open Animation Presets, and then the folder that you created, that preset should be in there. You can either create a new composition or you could even do this in a new project. So I'll just create a new project just to show you that this works. So from here, all I have to do is double click on the arrow preset. It'll create a shape layer with that arrow. Right from here, it looks like it's not going to work, but if you play it back, it actually does. So that's how you can create an arrow preset that you can reuse across all of your After Effects projects. From here, we could always manipulate how the arrow looks by changing the scale, rotation, colors, stroke, styling, all that kind of thing. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy animating!